I kept a hand on the pallet of boxes on the hover sled, making sure it didn't wobble while Blip and Blop pushed it up the ramp. It was all held in place solidly enough by high-tech netting much fancier than the kind we used, and I didn't need to worry much. So when we reached the cargo bay and G called for my assistance back on the ground, I didn't feel bad about leaving the Frillians to finish loading it. They were strong enough to muscle anything into place if needed anyway. "What's up?" I asked, as I trotted back down the ramp. "Thought you might weigh in on their pest problem before we go," G said with a twitch of his antennae towards the clients whose stuff we were delivering. More Frillians today, not as beefy as Blip and Blop, but with waving frills everywhere that just made G look like a praying mantis among flowers. He also looked smug, but that was nothing new. "I mentioned an animal expert and they mentioned payment," he told me. I came to a stop beside him. "You know I don't know everything, right? Just putting that out there. My vet training was on Earth." Yes, I gave them the disclaimers," G said. The client in front, a tall female with colors like a Siamese fighting fish, said, "That's better than anyone on our ship has. Something's getting into boxes in our cargo hold and we can't find it. Tore into some food and made a mess of the animal fibers." The shorter male behind her in salmon peach tones held out a lumpy handful of what looked like brown wool. "My guess is it's making a nest somewhere, but it's being wasteful with the stuff too. Tangled it up something fierce." My response died on my lips as I got a good look at it. Among the stray fibers was the exact shape of a teddy bear. "Can I see that?" I asked. He handed it over. I plucked off the extra bits, and yes, it was definitely meant to be a teddy bear, made by hand from the wool in the cargo hold. There were even little twists for eyes. I looked up at them. "You don't have a pest. You have a stowaway." They blustered and pooh-poohed the idea. Nonsense. How could there possibly be an intelligent creature on board without their knowledge? "We've been in space a long time," said the tall one, "only stopping at uninhabited locations for resources." "And at the," put in the pink one, then stopped at a sharp look from his teammate. I wasn't about to let that go. "The what?" I asked. The tall one sighed. "We salvaged some fuel from a wreck," she admitted. "But there was no one on it. We checked, and with the tow ship we saw in the distance, it seemed likely enough that the owner had jetted away in a life preserver rather than sticking around. It was a single-person ship." Somebody else piped up from between the many crates in their cargo hold. "It couldn't be a person. There's nowhere big enough to hide." I held up the teddy bear. "This is a child's toy from my planet." I looked up at the maze of pipes on the ceiling. "And my people like to climb." G was being smug behind me while I made a quick circuit of the room, looking for likely spots. One corner was particularly dark, and it had a series of crates below the pipes, stacked into a perfect ramp. I flashed back to the time a litter of kittens had found a similar hidey hole on my own ship. This spaceship was made by a different group of aliens altogether, but they never seemed to expect anyone to pay attention to nooks and crannies in the ceiling. "Hello?" I called, climbing onto the first crate with the wool bear in hand. "Anybody up there?" I continued in every language I knew greetings in, which included the galaxy's favorite trade language, which I knew well, several minor trade languages, which I did not, and a smattering of languages from Earth, which I knew not at all, plus English. Despite my efforts, I didn't hear a thing until I got all the way to the top. "Jumbo?" I tried, peering into the dark crevice. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" I held out the wool bear. "Is this yours?" A quiet gasp echoed off the pipes. Then two small arms reached out to grab the bear. With further coaxing, the girl clambered forward to where I could see her, dark skin, wide eyes, artfully braided hair, and clothes that looked fancy, if very dusty. I'm not great at kid ages, but she was young. Old enough to push buttons on her parents' spaceship, maybe, not old enough to steer. I still didn't know what language she spoke, but it was hard to go wrong with body language. I held out my arms for a hug. "Want to go home?" She sniffled and climbed forward into the embrace, clinging tight. That made it a bit of a challenge to get back down to floor level, but I managed. A crowd of Frillians and one smug mesmer waited there. "See?" G said to the tall Frillian. "Exactly the animal expert you needed." I shook my head in amusement. For all the wrong reasons, you're exactly right. The girl didn't want to be put down, so I hoisted her onto one hip and stood carefully. How far away was that crash site? Can you send a message to the planet or station the tow ship came from? Yeah, we're on it, the tall Frillian said, her frills flattened in what might have been shame. She directed a couple of the others to do that, and also to gather the fuel they'd scavenged. G cheered her up with talk of a probable finder's fee. Humans get very attached to their offspring, he said. There is a strong chance this one's parents are already advertising a reward. While they talked money, and G got our ship that promised fee for pest control, someone with sense arrived with a bottle of water and questions about what food would be suitable. The girl drank the water eagerly, not letting go of her bear, and didn't answer any of my questions about food allergies. She accepted some protein cubes and chewed them with determination. By then, a reply had already come from the nearest space station, and a ship was on the way, full of authority figures and very anxious parents, by the sounds of it. While the Frillians discussed that, and the little kid quietly refused to be put down, Z held up his communicator so I could talk to Captain Sunlight back on our ship. G had already explained the situation. The captain asked me, "How long do they expect until arrival?" "I think they said about half an hour," I said. "Hopefully that won't put us behind schedule." "No, we'll be fine," she said. "Given that the young one is so taken with you, we might as well stay to make sure everything gets resolved." "Does she need to visit the medical bay?" "I don't think so. She hasn't said anything yet, but she doesn't look injured. Couldn't hurt to give her a once-over with the hand scanner just in case. We've got time." I looked down at her thoughtfully, then had a bright idea. "And I bet she'd love to meet Telly, after we check her for allergies, of course." The captain agreed that was a fine idea. G took over the conversation while I asked the girl, in a mix of Earth languages and pantomime, if she wanted to see my cat. Her eyes lit up and she started talking in a spill of words that I didn't catch in the slightest. Spanish, maybe French, Portuguese. It didn't matter. The language of kitty ears and meow meow is almost as universally recognized as hugs. We walked from one ship to another and waited for her parents in the company of a medical scanner, human food, and a very friendly cat.